In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on February 2nd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Syracuse versus North Carolina. Syracuse walking into Chapel Hill feels a bit like a scrappy indie band stepping onto a main stage they are not really built for. The lights are brighter, the sound is louder, and the margin for error shrinks fast. The Orange finally got a breather by stopping that skid with a comfortable win over Notre Dame, and that kind of win gives a locker room a short burst of confidence. But now the reward is a road trip into a packed Smith Center where the home side has been perfect and has turned visiting teams into background characters more often than not. North Carolina has stacked win after win in that building, not just squeaking by but putting up big scoring nights and walking out with margins that feel more like a statement than a simple result. And that kind of home rhythm matters when you are talking about whether a favorite can cover a number rather than just survive the night. The records tell a pretty clean story, with North Carolina sitting in the upper tier of the conference race at 17-4 overall and Syracuse hanging around the middle at 13-9, which sounds respectable until you remember that the Orange are also staring at a brutal stretch of tough games right after this one. That matters emotionally as much as tactically, because a group that just snapped a losing streak can either ride that little surge or feel the weight of what is coming next. And facing a ranked team on the road in that kind of arena can turn that awareness into tight shoulders pretty quickly. Oddsmakers have treated this matchup as one where the favorite is clearly expected to control things, not one where both sides are treated like equals, and that overall tone lines up with how each team has been performing over the full season rather than just in a one-game bubble. On the floor, the contrast in how these teams tend to tilt games shows up in the simple things fans notice without opening a spreadsheet. North Carolina attacks the rim, pounds the glass, and strings together runs, while Syracuse is more comfortable leaning into shot making and hoping those jumpers hold up under pressure. The Tar Heels score in the low 80s on average and sit near the top of the league in rebounding margin. And that pairing is like a cheat code for a favorite, because second chance points and free throws are how big spreads get covered even when a game feels relatively normal possession to possession. Syracuse lives more in the mid-70s on the scoreboard and can get nudged around a bit on the boards over a full 40 minutes, which does not sound dramatic, but that slow drip of extra possessions has a way of showing up right around the final number. To be fair, there are real tools on the Syracuse side that can frustrate any opponent for stretches. The Orange have been one of the better three-point shooting teams in league play, knocking down close to 38% from deep in conference games, and they sit among the national leaders in blocked shots, which adds some nastiness at the rim and often keeps opponents from getting comfortable layup lines. That combination can absolutely fuel a short-term run where the Orange look like they belong on equal footing, and anyone who has watched college hoops long enough knows that a 5-minute heater from deep can flip a spread on its head in a hurry. The problem is that such a formula tends to be fragile on the road. Jumpers can flatten in a loud arena, legs get heavy in the second half, and if you are relying heavily on tough shots falling while the other side is feasting on the glass, the math eventually turns on you. North Carolina, by contrast, does not need anything exotic to lean their way. They have the deeper rotation, the stronger presence on the boards, and a track record of using that home crowd as a kind of extra push whenever a game gets even a little bit wobbly. It is not that Syracuse cannot keep this tight for stretches, it is that over the full 40-minute arc, the way these two teams score, rebound, and handle momentum tends to favor the home group stretching things out rather than clinging to a one-possession margin. There is always a risk of an ice-cold shooting night or a whistle pattern that keeps the underdog on the line, so nothing is guaranteed in a betting sense. But when you stack current form, home dominance, and matchup edges on the glass, the lean stays firmly on the side of the favorite to not only win but to do so with a cushion that matters to anyone holding a ticket on the spread. As our first pick for this matchup, the North Carolina Tar Heels to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. North Carolina does like to play at a brisk tempo with a possession count that leans faster than the national average and that naturally pushes totals upward. But pace is only half the story, and sometimes it is the less important half. This season, the Tar Heels have also shown real teeth on the defensive end, holding opponents right around 70 points per game while using their size on the glass to end possessions in one shot. And that is the part people sometimes gloss over when they only remember older North Carolina teams that turned everything into a running game. Syracuse is not a sieve either, and that is where things get more interesting than a simple fast team versus slow team angle. The Orange have been holding opponents to a similar scoring range, and their shot blocking has been a serious weapon, swatting around 6 attempts per night and forcing a lot of drives to end in kickouts or late clock pull-ups rather than clean finishes at the rim. That kind of rim protection does not just erase layups, it also changes behavior on both sides. Drivers hesitate, opponents settle more often, and games get nudged into more half-court possessions with fewer easy transition buckets, which quietly drags totals down, even if the tempo still looks energetic to the casual eye. In a February conference game with a lot of eyes on it, coaches also tend to lean on tighter rotations and more deliberate sets, especially as the second half wears on and every trip feels a little heavier. Here is the thing, there is a small contradiction built into this matchup that actually helps us read the total. Both teams have the ability to score in bunches, yet both have defensive strengths. So the question is not whether they can put up points, it is whether they will be allowed to do it cleanly for the full game. If the team that is expected to control the game does get out in front by a comfortable margin, that often slows things down rather than speeding them up. The group in control shifts from chasing style points to managing the clock, walking the ball up a little more, and prioritizing secure possessions over quick ones. On the other side, the trailing team often ends up forcing tougher looks, jacking more contested threes and driving into set defenses, which can create the illusion of urgency without actually producing a big jump in scoring efficiency. If, instead, the game stays tighter than projected, it almost certainly means the defenses are holding up well enough to keep either offense from blasting off, which again pushes toward a more modest scoring environment across the full 40 minutes. The one big wild card, as always in college basketball, is a whistle-heavy game with a parade to the foul line, and that scenario can blow up even the soundest logic on a total, but you live with that risk anytime you bet on points rather than sides. When you weigh the current season numbers, the defensive profiles, the way shot blocking and rebounding steer shot quality, and the likelihood that the second half tilts toward more controlled possessions rather than a full-speed sprint, the lean sides more with a game that lands below the projection than with one that looks like an arcade score. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. McNeese versus Stefen F. Austin. When you first see this matchup on the board, it feels like one of those spots where the market leans hard into the shiny name in last March's story. McNeese still carries that glow from knocking off Clemson in the tournament, and the analytics crowd has kept them sitting comfortably in that top tier of mid-majors with an offense that looks polished and efficient on paper. So it is no surprise that the line tilts toward the Cowboys as the road favorite because public memory can be loud, and books know it. The thing is, once you strip away the logo bias and actually look at what has happened this season, the picture starts to tilt the other way bit by bit. Stefen F. Austin comes in with a 19-3 overall record, a 12-1 mark in league play, and they sit alone at the top of the conference ladder like a team that has quietly handled its business every single week. They have not dropped a game in their own building this year, running a perfect home slate, and the last time they did lose there was, fittingly, against this same McNeese program late last regular season, which is the kind of thing a proud home crowd does not forget easily. There is also the recent chapter between these two, which keeps things grounded. Earlier this season, Stefen Austin walked into Lake Charles and traded blows with McNeese all night, only to fall by 2 in a 66-64 heartbreaker that felt less like a shootout and more like a long, stubborn tug of war. For a road underdog, playing the supposed bully almost even in their own gym is not just a moral victory, it is a pretty clear proof of concept that the matchup itself is closer than the national conversation wants it to be. Now the roles flip, and the rematch lands in Nacogdoches, with the William R. Johnson Coliseum set up as one of those loud, slightly claustrophobic environments that college hoops does better than any pro arena ever will. Stefen Austin rolls in on a 7-game win streak, chasing a bit of revenge for that narrow loss, and there is real weight on this one because first place and a crucial tiebreaker hang in the balance. That kind of stage tends to crank up the noise, tighten the rotations, and make every rebound feel like a loose ball in the final minutes of a tournament game. Both programs are in their first year under new head coaches, with Bill Armstrong running the show at McNeese and Matt Brewer steering Stefen Austin. Instead of turning this into a track meet, both staffs have leaned into a more grown-up style, with half-court sets, defensive accountability, and a clear sense that you win serious games by guarding and valuing the ball, not by trying to win a highlight contest. Most respected analytics sites slot both teams in that rough top 100 neighborhood, and the common thread is that they rely on efficient, tough defense and disciplined offense more than on racing up and down. Stefen Austin's identity especially feels built for tight spreads and tight games. They play a balanced brand of basketball, scoring reliably, defending with an edge, and posting a double-digit average margin that shows they do not just eke out wins, they control them for long stretches. They rebound with force, consistently beating opponents on the glass, which is one of those basic, blue-collar edges that shows up even when shots stop falling or when nerves kick in. That physically engaged, rebound-heavy style rarely vanishes at home, and when you add the energy of their crowd to it, possessions start to feel longer for the visiting favorite and shorter for the home side that knows every dead spot on the floor. McNeese is still very good, and the Cowboys deserve respect, but here they are being asked to walk into a building where Stefen Austin has not lost all season and outplay a team that has already proven it can drag them into a 1 or 2 possession fight. There are no major injury concerns on either side, so this shapes up as strength against strength, with both teams more or less at full capacity and both coaching staffs fully aware of how much this night can swing the title race. When a matchup checks that many boxes for a close finish, the combination of a live home crowd and the extra cushion of points has real value, especially in the final minutes when every whistle and every loose rebound feels heavier than it should. As our first pick for this matchup, the Stefen Austin Lumberjacks to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. McNeese has been putting up healthy point totals all year. Stefen Austin has not exactly been shy about filling the scoreboard either, and both offenses are efficient enough that a quick glance at the season averages suggests something wide open. Honestly, that is the trap. The first time they met this season, the final score landed at 66-64, which tells a very different story from the season-long box scores. That game did not feel like a comedy of missed layups or a weird shooting slump kind of night. It felt like two connected defenses choking off the first option, switching and rotating, and forcing both sides deep into the shot clock over and over again until every possession turned into a small puzzle. When teams know each other well, the easy stuff disappears fast, and that was already on display in Lake Charles. Tempo numbers from the analytics crowd back that up with a quieter kind of evidence. Both teams sit in that mid-60s range in possessions per game, which is firmly in the measured and selective category rather than sprinting up the floor at every chance. And they both grade out as better than average on the defensive side, and when you look at their overall efficiency profiles, you see strong, top 100 level outfits that can squeeze games rather than stretch them, especially when the stakes are real. Stefen Austin leans into that even more with how they handle the glass. They pull down close to 40 rebounds a night while holding opponents several boards under that, which is not just a line in a box score, it is a tempo lever. Every defensive rebound that sticks is one fewer second chance look, one more possession where the opponent has to walk the ball up, call a set, and grind through another trip against a set defense. It is a very old-school spoiler script built around holding teams in the mid-60s, owning the boards, and letting the crowd do the rest of the emotional work. McNeese's offense can explode, no question, but when they face better opposition or see a team for the second time, their games tend to tighten instead of turning into fireworks. This matchup has extra stakes attached, with first-place talk, streaks, and pride all stirred together, and coaches in those spots usually shorten their benches, trim the risky possessions, and live with a slower, more controlled rhythm than the raw averages would suggest. You can almost picture both staffs willing to win a 62-60 type of grind instead of chasing style points. There is also the chess element that comes from familiarity. Each side now has a full game of film on the other sets, wrinkles, and counters, and that usually favors the defense because it is easier to take something away than to suddenly invent a brand new way to score in early February. Empty trips start to feel heavier, whistles get louder, and every late clock possession carries extra tension, which usually pulls scores downward instead of pushing them higher. In that context, any posted number that quietly expects both of these teams to match or exceed their season scoring pace against one of the best defenses they have seen in weeks feels a little ambitious. Given what we saw in the first meeting, the shared preference for a controlled tempo, and the way high-leverage conference games tend to turn into bruising, whistle-filled, late-clock slugfests, this one looks far more like a rock fight than a free-flowing shoot-round. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Southern versus Jackson State. Southern walks into Jackson on a chilly early February night as the team expected to handle business, but the matchup is not just some free square on a betting slip. Jackson State is sitting there with that classic hungry home underdog vibe, and those Southwestern Athletic Conference gyms have a way of turning a normal game into a bit of a neighborhood argument. Records already tell a small story, with Southern at 8-13 and Jackson State at 6-15, but the more interesting part is how they get to those numbers. Southern leans into controlled chaos. They press, they poke at the ball, they live in the passing lanes, and they ask you all game long if your guards are really as comfortable as you think. On paper, they score just over 80 points per night and give up about 79, which leaves them with a tiny positive margin, but the real edge is how often they force empty trips and turn those into free throws the other way. You watch them for a few minutes, and you can almost feel opposing ball handlers get a little tired mentally, not just physically. Honestly, that mental wear and tear matters more than one extra-made three. Jackson State comes from the opposite direction. They grind through possessions, and this season their box scores have looked much harsher. They average just under 67 points while allowing north of 86, and that gap is not just a bad week, it runs across the schedule. Opponents have hit close to 47% from the field and knocked down close to 9 threes a game against them, which feels like every mistake gets punished. A big part of that ugly profile comes from a non-conference slate that threw them against bigger, deeper high-major programs that turned their turnovers and defensive lapses into full-on routes. Even with that context, the contrast is stark when you line them up against a Southern team that already likes to push the tempo and test your conditioning. Trends tug this matchup in two directions at once, which is where it gets fun. If you look at recent games with a similar point spread range, Jackson State has been downright friendly to anyone backing them at home. They have covered as small home underdogs again and again in this building, the kind of pattern that sharp bettors keep in the back of their minds even if they roll their eyes at basic trends. Southern, on the other hand, has had a rough time cashing tickets as a small road favorite, with only a single recent road game in that kind of number where they actually finished on the right side for spread backers. So the raw matchup screams one way, while the recent spread history keeps whispering, "Are you sure you want to step in front of that home dog run?" Roster status tilts that balance right back. Current injury reports list Southern as clean, and they have their key rotation pieces available. Jackson State, though, is without guard Kevion Hunt for the season, and that is not just a name on a report. He has not played this year and is expected to miss the entire campaign, which means one less steady ball handler in a game where the opponent is built to press your dribbling and your decision-making for 40 minutes. You can talk about schemes all you want, but handling pressure late in the second half with a shortened backcourt is where cracks usually show. History between these two leans toward the visitors as well. Southern has taken 7 of the last 10 in the series and has won the last 4 meetings, including that wild 91-89 overtime game last season that felt like 3 games packed into one night. When one team keeps finding ways to close games in the same matchup, it becomes harder to write it off as pure randomness. Here's the thing, the market wants you to fall in love with the home dog story again because it has paid recently, but the current rosters and current season numbers tilt quietly but firmly toward the roadside, handling their business. As our first pick for this matchup, the Southern Jaguars to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. If you only look at season averages, you would expect a track meet. Southern games average right around 159 combined points, with those 80-point nights on offense and 79 allowed. Jackson State games land at roughly 153 combined, with that 66.9 scored and 86.5 allowed. Put those together and your first instinct is to think the total should soar. The catch is that those numbers are built on very different kinds of nights. Jackson State's early schedule included some lopsided losses where opponents ran up scores and inflated the defensive numbers in a way that does not always translate to conference play. Those games against bigger, deeper teams turned mistakes into 30 or 40-point losses and shoved their defensive averages into the red. Once you move into Southwestern Athletic Conference competition, the rhythm shifts. Familiar scouting, bus trips instead of charter flights, and a lot more tape on each other tend to pull totals a little closer to earth. Southern still plays fast, but even their recent game log hints at a ceiling. Across their latest stretch, combined scores have averaged around the 150 mark, and only a few of those games have climbed past the kind of total we are talking about here. There are still bursts, of course, because their style invites runouts and quick threes, but there are also long stretches where missed shots and fouls stack up without the scoreboard exploding. It is that odd mix of pace and imperfect efficiency, plenty of possessions, but not every trip ending in 3 points. Jackson State's side of the scoring story is a little messy. Recent totals for them have floated higher on average, thanks to games where their defense leaked points, yet there has also been a noticeable stretch of unders as they move deeper into league play. You can almost feel them trying to slow things down a touch at home, trusting that a slightly calmer tempo and a friendly rim might keep them in games where talent and depth are tilted against them. That tug of war between wanting to run with Southern and needing to protect the ball creates a strange tempo where you get a lot of possessions, but not all of them are clean, high-quality ones. Injury context nudges the scoring picture in a specific direction too. Without Kyvian Hunt, Jackson State has fewer trusted handlers to push pace all game while still staying organized. Late possessions can turn more cautious when coaches know they are one bad pass away from another fast break the other way. It is not that the game suddenly becomes slow, more that the chaos gets channeled into longer half-court possessions sprinkled with rushed shots instead of constant efficient scoring. Southern's defense adds another wrinkle. They are aggressive, they foul, they gamble, and they do a decent job of making opponents uncomfortable from the three-point line. That kind of defense can actually pull totals down in certain spots. There are plenty of free throws and loose balls, but there is also broken rhythm, late clock heaves, and possessions where the ball barely finds the second side of the floor. Honestly, when both teams are a little ragged, the scoreboard can lag behind the energy on the floor. All of this creates a classic numbers trap. Season-long scoring suggests a shootout, and early blowouts on Jackson State's schedule shout points. Recent conference play, tighter rotations, and a key guard missing tell a quieter story, one where the game still has pace, but the efficiency does not quite live up to that reputation. That mix of fast but flawed possessions leans toward a result where the combined points stay shy of what those raw averages might tempt you into expecting. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Kansas versus Texas Tech. A ranked-on-ranked street fight hits Lubbock with Kansas walking into a loud Texas Tech building on national television, and you can almost hear the buzz through the screen already. The market loves the home side in this kind of spot. Short travel, crazy crowd, fresh hype, and that is exactly when the road team can quietly become the more interesting story. Kansas rolls in with a matching 16-5 overall record and a 6-2 mark in league play, and it is not an empty record padded by sleepy wins. They just ripped through a stretch of very different opponents, Colorado on the road, a rivalry trip to Kansas State, heavyweight brands like Iowa State and Baylor, then that 90-82 shootout with BYU where they looked completely comfortable trading haymakers. They have shown they can slog through slower, half-court grinders, then turn around and live in the 70s or 80s when the game opens up, and that type of flexibility travels. Texas Tech still has the shine of a hot run, 5 straight wins before the stumble at UCF, and that loss was the kind that rattles people who only saw the final score. UCF pushed them around on the glass, forced turnovers, and made Tech look a little less invincible for a night, but the reputation stuck more than the reality, which is part of why this number leans so hard toward the home side. Tech still plays with a high-powered offensive identity, sharing the ball, getting pace when they can, and leaning on star play from guys like JT Toppin and Christian Anderson, who sit near the top of the league scoring and table-setting lists. On paper that sounds scary, but Kansas brings in a top-shelf defense and a deliberate tempo that tends to sand down some of those sharp offensive edges. The stylistic clash really does feel like a playoff series crammed into 40 minutes. Tech wants rhythm, energy, and a bit of chaos, the kind where the crowd is already standing before a shot even goes up. Kansas prefers the opposite, longer possessions, good spacing, patient reads, and the kind of half-court discipline that can make a loud arena feel awkwardly quiet for stretches. Their pace lives in that mid to high 60s possession range, and that usually keeps margins within a couple of key trips, even when they are not at their sharpest. On the road this season, that blueprint has held up, whether it was Colorado's altitude, Kansas State's emotions, or even the earlier test at UCF. Perception is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Recent history whispers in favor of Tech, including the trip into Lawrence where Toppin had his big moment, and Tech walked out with a win that stuck in everyone's memory. Moments like that tend to linger, especially for people who remember how easily Kansas used to handle this matchup. Now, with Tech enjoying that glow and Kansas carrying the "yeah but" label from last season, the spread skews toward the trendy new power. The tricky part is that Kansas has been quietly covering numbers during this recent run, while the broader market seems a step slow to fully recalibrate to how well they are playing. Availability on both sides does not really shove this away from the dog, and that matters. Texas Tech is missing Latrell Hoover, who has been a non-factor all year, so the core rotation remains intact and familiar. Kansas is without Will Thengvall and has Elmarco Jackson tagged with some uncertainty, but they are more depth notes than identity notes. The more interesting subplot is Darren Peterson, who exploded early against BYU, then dealt with cramping that cooled his night. Cramping is annoying, not structural, and while it might tweak his minutes a bit, it does not tear up what Kansas wants to do as a group. Veteran front court, multiple handlers, and a coach who thrives in these exact road cauldrons. Honestly, when you step back and think about two teams with equal records, similar talent, and a long series history that tilts toward tight games, taking the multiple possession cushion with the road side starts to feel less like a leap and more like a disciplined play. As our first pick for this matchup, the Kansas Jayhawks to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. This total looks like it wants you to imagine fireworks from the moment you turn the game on. Recent scores make it easy to picture that: Texas Tech coming off games that landed in the high 80s and low 90s, Kansas dropping 90 on BYU, and the casual takeaway is that both offenses are rolling and will simply keep sprinting. It feels natural to think, why would this one be any different? Here is the thing, the tempo profiles do not scream track meet. Neither side plays especially fast across the full season. Both sit in that modest possession range where every trip actually matters, and that usually caps how wild the total output can get. Texas Tech can look fast because they score efficiently when they do get into rhythm, but the raw possession count rarely looks like a true run-and-gun team. Kansas leans toward even more control, and that is by design. Their defense is strong, their offense is methodical, and they are very comfortable grinding a game into a slower, more deliberate flow where both teams have to work deep into the clock. Context pulls in the same direction. This is not a sleepy midweek non-conference contest. It is a big Monday showcase with both teams sitting at 6-2 in league play and chasing prime positioning in the conference race. Games with that kind of weight often tighten up as they go, especially in the second half, where every timeout feels longer and every possession feels heavier. Coaches shorten rotations, trust guys who will execute sets, and you see fewer rushed early clock threes just to feed the crowd. That kind of emotional gravity tends to chip away at the very top of the scoring ceiling. There is also the history of how Kansas has fared in this building. They rarely get completely shut down. They have scored well enough to win plenty of times in Lubbock, but a lot of those nights land in that mid-range, not full fireworks territory. Tech uses its home court like a pressure cooker, physical on the perimeter, noisy on every catch, and willing to live with some ugly stretches on offense if it means making you earn every good look. Kansas has handled that plenty of times, but handling it is not the same as turning the thing into a free-flowing shootout. Honestly, if you picture a classic Big 12 battle in this gym, you probably see tough twos, contested threes, and a few empty trips where the ball never really gets where it is supposed to go. The recent move on the total tells its own story without naming numbers. Public money tends to chase what it just saw on the scoreboard. Big Tech outputs, a Kansas game that hit 90, and that bias nudges the total higher than the more grounded tempo and defensive profiles might suggest. Kansas shot the lights out against BYU, especially from deep, and expecting that same level of efficiency in a hostile road environment is asking for a repeat of a pretty special night. On the other side, Texas Tech just heard about its defense all week after the UCF loss, and teams in that position often respond with sharper effort, more urgency on closeouts, and fewer casual possessions. A single hot shooting stretch from either team could still push things higher, and there is always the chaos factor of college officiating and free throws, but the more likely script points toward a solid, intense game that stays a bit more compressed than the bloated perception number suggests. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.